which tonight will be read by Reverend Brian Rensford from the Holroyd New Life Church.
Councillors, I've just returned from Zimbabwe again, so if you don't want to catch an infectious disease, please keep your distance. Let's pray, shall we, for our council, for our staff and for our community. Almighty God, we pray this evening for our councillors represented here, for the staff of Cumberland Council that are represented, and for the community that we all stand representing. Myself as a minister, I have no relevance unless I understand my role as that of a servant of the community that I represent. And we pray for all of us have a similar attitude, the administration, for a broader community that is not just those who voted for us or we represent, but for everybody involved in the community that we now stand before you to administer. I ask, Lord, that your Holy Spirit will help and equip me beyond my inadequacies and each one of us in a similar way, that we may extend ourselves on behalf of others. Help us all to work together to enable the districts now known as Cumberland Council to flourish, to prosper, to live in harmony, accord, as we acknowledge our own limitations and ask for your help, your wisdom, and your grace to enable us to contribute together towards meeting our part of Sydney's metro function and then do it in an excellent way. And I ask you in this name of Jesus, Lord and Saviour, amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend, and welcome back. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Darug people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Please remain standing for the national anthem. Thank you, councillors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Mr. General Manager.
Good evening. Please be advised that the open session of this council meeting will be recorded and streamed live on council's website. This recording will also be archived and be made available on council's website. Whilst all care will be taken to maintain the privacy of the public gallery, members of the public may be recorded. Council requests that all members of the public are respectful and use appropriate language.
Thank you, Mr. McNulty. I have a...
Acknowledgement of country, Mr.
Yes, we did. I have Councillor Rami has requested a leave of absence for this council meeting. Are there any other apologies? Thank you, Councillor Garrard. So I have moved Councillor Addy, seconded Councillor Wong. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Any declarations of interest, councillors? No declarations of interest. Council, can I have a mover for the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 19th of September 2018? Was that Councillor Wong? Seconded Councillor Christou. Is there any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council, we have no public forums or speakers. I'll ask for, run through the list and ask if there's any items the council wishes to discuss. So council C10/18-186. Councillor Lake. 187, the annual disclosure. No. 188, the Cumberland Council Community Grants Program, Round 1. No. 189, the response to... Councillor Christou. 190 to Percy Street. I'm sorry. I'll come back to you. I'm more than happy, but I'll run through this item. I'm sure that this item is going to be discussed, so I'm more than happy to park that, and I'll lead that in the lead. Thank you. Could we just get a form filled of the speaker, please? Council, item 191, the tender evaluation report for CCTV. No. One moment, councillors. Council, 192, notice of motion amendment of council resolution for the council chambers table. You do, because it's a notice of motion. Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you, Councillor Sarkis. Okay, so I will, before I go to the other questions, I will then call for 187, 188, 191. Can I have a mover? Move Councillor Sarkis, seconded Councillor Elmore. 190 is pulled, so we can discuss it. The ones, I'll run through it again. 187, 188, 191. And I had moved Councillor Sarkis, seconded Councillor Elmore. Is there any discussion? No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Just want to wait for the speaker. Thank you. Council, I have a speaker for item C10/18-109. Move Councillor Addy, seconded Councillor Sarkis. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Miss Helen Deacon, would you like to come to the rostrum, please? Ms Deakin, you'll have 3 minutes to address council, and if you could please stay there if there's any questions that the councillors need to ask you. Thank you.
I will do. Thank you so much. Apologies for the inconvenience and the miscommunication. I've just been asked by my client, who is the applicant for the proposed school at Percy Street, to do a short presentation to you and provide you some further updates information. And one of the first points of clarification was just to maybe give a little bit further insight into who the applicant is. The Australian Turkish Marif Foundation, which is commonly known as the ATMF, mainly comprises of directors from Australia. In terms of the funding arrangements, in terms of what is being proposed by the school, there will be a mortgage loan agreement between ATMF and the Gallipoli Education Solutions, who are the actual owners of the land. The land will be repaid, the loan will be repaid back to ATMF on an agreed timeframe. ATMF is an organisation formed in Australia comprising of an ABN. ATMF is also a not-for-profit organisation. The sole purpose of providing funds to the ATMF and the Gallipoli Education Solution is to provide quality education. So just in relation very quickly to the resolution that is before you this evening, we obviously acknowledge and appreciate the officer's recommendation of moving to an FSR of 1.2 to 1 in respect of the school, particularly as this now makes that consistent with the proposed school development that is the subject of a state significant development application, which I understand you're aware of. I just wanted to briefly speak in relation to the terms of seeking contributions greater than that have currently been proposed by the school, and in particular in the correlation between the council's precinct traffic study, which has recently reached some conclusions. There seems to be some disparities, I suppose, between what our conclusions have been and what maybe some of those more recent reports have been, and I'd like us to be able to provide more time to sit down and talk with the relevant council officers in relation to that. But interestingly, the school's greatest impact in terms of intersections is a 10% increase to the Dark Rock Road and Rawson streets, and not the St Heliers and Rawson Street intersection, which seems to be the focus of council's immediate concerns. In fact, the officer's report on page 96 refers to the critical intersection upgrades of St Heliers and Rawson's. However, the school itself only impacts just 2% additional operational effects on this intersection when it will be operational. What we're seeing is a lot of impact on these intersections are a result of council's own recent changes to their LEPs and increasing of FSR. In fact, that particular intersection that I just referred to would represent a 3% or less increase. So therefore, there has been an offer put on the table. It is a minor contribution, but that minor contribution could be a relevant equal contribution to the impact that the school would have on that intersection. And it might be just a point of matter that might be worth considering. The changes to intersections, as I've mentioned, in capacity is largely a result of council's own LEP changes and FSRs. And the most appropriate mechanism to collect funding is to upgrade these roads and intersections is via Section 94 contribution plans. And this is a much more equitable and fair outcome in relation to councils gathering funding for such programs. And so I would put it to council that it might be worth, as part of your broader planning considerations for the precinct, a more detailed Section 94, and I apologise, I'm probably referring to the wrong part of the Act, be put together. That's it.
Thank you, Ms Deakin. I believe Councillor Grove, you have a question?
Yes, although I'm happy for okay. You started off by referencing the ATMF and the financing arrangements under the, and I understand there's not necessarily a planning matter, but you've tabled the information. Could you just go over those details again?
Certainly. I'll read you what the statement is that I have, so I hope you understand. Yes, it's the Australian Turkish Marif Foundation. So the Australian Turkish Marif Foundation is known as the ATMF. It comprises of directors from Australia. There is a mortgage loan agreement that will be between the ATMF and the Gallipoli Education Solutions, who are going to be the owners of the land. The loan will be repaid back to the ATMF on an agreed timeframe. ATMF is an organisation formed in Australia comprising an ABN. It is a not-for-profit organisation, and it and the Gallipoli Education Solutions' sole purpose for funding is to provide quality education.
Where does the ATMF source their money from?
I'm, as I said to you, I'm reading from some wording and some information I've been provided. I couldn't detail that further.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Sarkis?
This ATMF goes belly up or something happens, what then happens to the loan or that property?
I would say that I couldn't comment on that. I don't know the details of that arrangement.
Okay.
Councillor Lake?
So can you just, are you able to explain who Gallipoli Education Solutions are? Is that an incorporated body?
I understand that they are the owners of the land, so they would be incorporated in some form. I could certainly see if I can endeavour to provide council with some further information on those matters,
Okay.
but I don't know the answer, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Christou?
Are you able to disclose the amount of the loan and the term?
I'm afraid I'm not privy to that information.
Any further questions? No further questions? Thank you, Ms Deakin.
Thank you.
Can I move back in? Move Councillor Addy, seconded Councillor Grove. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council.
And look, this doesn't relate to planning matters. It would have no bearance on whether I made a decision to support or oppose or otherwise amend a planning matter. But I'm quite concerned by what I just heard. And as a community leader, I feel that something needs to be said. In this country, we have a very stringent process around foreign investment. We have a stringent process around foreign investment for investment in our land, in our utilities, and in our primary industry, whether it's agriculture or mining or whatnot. There is no more important investment that you could make in this country than in education. And I don't have any hard facts before me, but we all know there's been substantial rumour and innuendo and gossip in the community about the funding source for this institution. I think that needs to be reviewed. I'm disappointed that this country doesn't have processes for reviewing this sort of investment. I think that's a matter which is slightly outside of my pay grade, but I can't let this matter go by without flagging my genuine concerns about the funding of education in this country and the open door this country appears to have to investment from other governments into our own education system. I would flag that I'm not aware of the Australian government investing in private schools overseas. That would be somewhat an unusual expectation of our constituency. And I think that's a discussion that needs to be had, maybe not at a council level, but certainly at a state and federal level when considering how we register schools, how we recognise schools, and what sorts of foreign investment we do and don't support in this country. So I just wanted to get that for the record, the folks at home, that I have concerns in that space. From a planning perspective, I think the report details where this is at, and I'll let the debate take its way from there.
You, Councillor Grove. Councillor Zareka.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm quite taken by what my fellow councillor and good friend Mr Councillor Groves just said. What difference does it make where someone obtains their funding from? When a developer makes an application, do we ask him, did you get your money from China or did you get it from Cuba? What relevance has this got with a planning matter? I'm struggling to work that out. If it's Mr Mayor, I'd be moving for the adoption of the recommendation purely on what's been provided. I mean, what else do we need? Why are we holding this back? I've read the report.
I've never indicated that this would have an impact on how I would vote with respect to this planning proposal. I accept that this council has no jurisdiction on monitoring foreign investment activity. I accept that that's a role for state governments, and through partnership in education, state governments as well. But I feel that as a leader of this community that we can't let this just go by, although, you know, it wouldn't have an impact on my vote in this space, without calling it out.
Thank you, Councillor Grove. I let Councillor Grove intervene. It hasn't taken any of your time, so I just thought it was a clarification. Councillor Zareka.
In relation to the VPA, I'm sure that we can come to...
Pardon me, Councillor Zareka. You've moved the recommendation. I'll ask for a second just so that you can finish your speech. Is there a second? And Councillor Sarkis. Thank you, Councillor Zareka.
In relation to the VPA, this is a term of an agreement. They've put an offer. We haven't responded to that. I'm sure council would be commercially minded to sit down with the applicant and make a deal about that. It's not a major stumbling block. They've come forward and they've given us good consideration for the impact that they believe will be on this community. We shouldn't be calling out for them to fix our problems. We have a problem which has come about from the LEPs, the amendments to the LEPs. And we should have some contribution to that. The VPA should be a balance on both sides of the equation. On the one hand, you have one party providing $150,000. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the council seeking, I believe, $1.5 million. So. We've got to work out what's in fact reasonable and what's in fact due, and it's got to come to a meeting of the minds. Regarding what's the point 4? Sorry, I can't see that far. Oh, I'm not going to talk to that, Mr. Mayor. I'll finish on that point.
Thank you, Councillor Zareka. I have Councillor Christou. Are you speaking for the motion or against?
I'm speaking against, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Christou.
I have great concerns regarding this planning proposal. I really do. I'm not impressed by what I'm seeing. I don't believe councillors were given the information in a due course and given time to consider it appropriately. I'm not convinced with the amount of proposed VPA that's going to be kicked in and the overall expense to council. And I'm also not convinced about the so-called traffic studies and impacts on the Jellibaloo precinct. I think we're going to open up a can of worms, which is going to cost council maybe hundreds of thousands and maybe into millions of dollars. And I, for one, will not be supporting this as it is tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Christou. Councillor Sarkis, I take it you're speaking in favour of the motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say that I'm a great lover of educational facilities, and the speaker that was in the public forum just a minute ago spoke about the agreements that they have in place with the ATMF and the Gallipoli Education Solutions Limited groups, they being the owners of the property. You also mentioned that the ATMF is a not-for-profit organisation, that they're going to be taking a loan from them and then repaying that loan back. And it's probably more information than what we need. And that starts some questions, you know, they're trigger points for questions in the back of your head. And those questions aren't delightful questions from where I'm standing. And so they're not questions that I'm going to put out here because it's not the appropriate forum. But I support the concept of an educational facility in that location, and for the purpose of the target community that they're going for, right? Because it's extremely appropriate. And based on the merit of that, I'm supporting my councillor colleague in the motion. There is a whole heap of unanswered questions now that would come to light. So in view of what we have before us, I seconded the motion because I agreed with the concept, and I'm not going to change my seconding, but if somebody moved to defer this matter so that we got more information, then I think that would be the way to go at this point, so that when we come to vote on this in 2 weeks' time or whenever it comes back, we have a clearer understanding of all these questions that are now in our heads, and not just for my sake, but for your sake and every councillor in this room's sake, and for the community's sake, Mr. Mayor. I think there are questions that need to be answered, right? Again, I'll flag that I am in support of an educational facility for the purposes of what we've spoken about. And we've had a briefing on this last week, one that I was there for the first 5 minutes, then I got a phone call, I had to leave. But I did get a rundown on the briefing, so I am up to date with what the proposal is and what they're hoping for there. And again, I support that concept. But there are questions that have come to light tonight in my mind that I'd like cleared, and I think the only way to do that is to perhaps have it deferred. Again, I'm not moving that way because I am the seconder and I won't retract from being the seconder, but if somebody was to do that, I think that'd be the appropriate step to take this evening.
I thank you, Councillor Sarkis. Councillor Lake.
Thank you. That's a very convenient segue, Mr. Mayor. I'll defer. I'll move that that this matter be deferred pending receipt of comments from Transport for New South Wales and Roads and Maritime Services following their review of Council's draft traffic study for the Gallipoli precinct. And I have a seconder, Councillor Grove.
Councillor Grove, you seconding that? Thank you, Councillor.
I just.
Yep. Oh. Councillor Lake.
Mr. Mayor, this is the first time this proposal's come before these councillors as a body. I know the matter has a long history, but we haven't been involved in that history. Trying to educate ourselves on what has been happening with this has been a bit of a challenge. It's clear from the business paper that the pivotal issue is the road upgrades and traffic and transport management. How should all that be done, and how should it be paid for? I don't think we should be looking at the FSR or agree to the proposal going out to the community until we know the attitude of the RMS and Transport for New South Wales to the proposals. The business paper says the council's expecting comments from them in October. That might be a bit too hopeful, but perhaps we can make it known to those agencies that we're waiting for the comments before we take this any further. We need to know that the works that are being recommended in our report, expert report on traffic study, are going to be agreed to by these other agencies. And we're also told that it's going to involve dedication of some private land. So there are real issues here that need to be grappled with before we get down to the actual dynamics of the planning controls in the proposal. And the proposal may need amendment in any event following the comments that we receive from those agencies. So I just think it's just too soon for us to be looking at FSRs and planning controls, and it's too soon to be talking about putting the matter out for public consultation. Goodness, I'd have real trouble trying to explain it at this stage to anyone who rang me if it went out. So let's have a look at what this final package might look like before we take this any further, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. You had some questions, Councillor Sarkis?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. As I was listening, and again, going through the report earlier, but just listening to Councillor Lake and going through some of the discussions earlier, one of the questions that came to mind is looking at the location of this site, being on the corner just next to the place of worship there. It's going to have an impact on the rest of Gillaballoo, and I know that we're seeking a report on the traffic, well, from a traffic perspective, but have the residents in Gillaballoo been notified? Because this is, if you look at that portion of our LGA, it's quite congested. Even though it's predominantly houses, it's actually quite a congested corner. And the zoning there is R2, so I questioned why it was R2. And that was some time ago that we had these questions put to council officers. And as I understand it, there was some kind, and I'm happy to stand corrected, but I believe there was some kind of a heritage. I think Councillor Addy had some knowledge of this as well. Yeah, but it was a site, a viewing point from, I think it was the bridge that went over, is it Queen Street there? I'm not sure. I'm not really. Station Road, is that what it is? Over, down towards the, you couldn't build higher than a particular height so that you wouldn't block the view of the mosque. It was something like that. I don't remember the exact details, but I think that I didn't see in this report that was referred to anywhere. So, you know, I think that that's something that perhaps the mover of the amendment might want to include, be incorporated in the response back to council. Is that affected in any way, shape or form by that's imposed? It might not be, and hopefully it's not, but it's better to get that clarity at this point.
Would you like to
It is.
comment, Mr. McNulty?
Okay. I may have gone. Yep.
There is some comments on the view line analysis in the report, but the proposals that council's considering for the Gillaballoo precinct in terms of heights are based on the view line analysis, but they are yet to be put in place. The current zoning is R2 there. So what the work that's been done on the view line analysis will provide the basis of any future LEP work that goes on in that precinct.
Is that going to affect this proposal?
No, the view line analysis was undertaken, says that the FSR of 1 or 1.2, whatever is agreed, can be accommodated and maintain the view lines to the mosque.
1.2 to 1. Okay. Where is it written? Because when I page,
Page 94.
which is the page I'm on. Oh yeah, view line analysis. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Wong?
Can I ask the applicant some questions?
Certainly, councillor. I'd have to go out, back out. Move, councillor Sarkis, seconded councillor Christou. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Councillor, I take it it's to Miss Deakin. Yep, councillor Wong.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Miss Deakin. I just have a question about when are you expecting this school will be up and running?
Well, the state significant development application was lodged with the Department of Planning in September. I understand that it's recently come off exhibition. So the Department of Planning is now in its next stage of reviewing those submissions and comments and seeking any amendments required. Obviously, the ability for that state significant DA to be enacted will be dependent upon the process of the planning proposal and the state significant development application that are running in parallel.
Okay.
But in terms of the end operator's intention, there is a design to have a school up and operating 2019. And there is, as part of the state significant DA, a staged approach to utilising part of the existing building on the sites to be able to, and you probably can appreciate, you just don't open your doors to a school and it functions as a fully fledged school. You need to build a school up, so you've got to have a bit of a plan of introducing classes over time and then slowly building up. So there is, the state significant development application has a lot more information in that regard.
Okay, so when are you expecting the first student will be enrolled? early 2019, or
There is a desire for there to be students enrolled from 2019, yes.
is that early, like first semester? Sorry, first term or fourth term? Well,
I just obviously get some others that might be a little bit more knowledgeable on that.
well, that's what I hope so.
So, sorry, I was just receiving some additional information that the school has made application from the Department of Education to be able to operate a school. They're hoping to have an outcome of that within the next 6 weeks. At that stage, they will then seek to potentially commence operation of this school, but in a different location where it obviously is permissible and can be operated as they slowly build up and get the relevant approvals in place for Percy Street.
Okay.
I hope that's clear enough.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wong. Councillor Grave, do you wish to ask anything of the
Question
Speaker?
for staff.
Thank you. Move resumption, Councillor Addy. Councillor Elmore, all those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Councillor Grove.
If I could, someone from the planning team ask questions of, we've got a Jellabaloo precinct. I'm aware that the administrator had an Auburn town centre plan or proposal or something in that space, which I understand is still on track. Are new zonings and FSRs proposed as part of that town centre plan for Auburn?
Mr Davis.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, the area that is currently zoned R2 low density residential was proposed under that strategy. So for the purpose of getting community comment, was proposed to be upzoned to R3 medium density residential.
Is that like saying for the purposes of debate, or?
It's a strategy as such. So it wasn't a draft LEP amendment.
So there's no hard zoning proposal change?
Not at this stage.
Okay. Why?
Through Mr. Mayor, so that area there, that precinct is within close proximity to the station. It's and the centre, the main part of the centre. And I think it was a recommendation of the consultants that were doing the review of the height analysis to look at the zoning in that area. I think there'd been requests from various landowners over time to look at increasing the zone in that area. So it was something that we looked at as part of that strategy to get comments back from the or feedback from the public.
So I'm just a little bit lost. So we've done a study, and so did the study canvass the future of the IN2 land? Did it canvass any options, future?
Through Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that the strategy actually made put out anything particular for that site, because I think at the time we were aware that the planning proposal was being submitted or had just been submitted.
Was any traffic modelling done as part of that plan?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, no traffic modelling had been done at that stage. It was a strategy for comment, and before that went to any further to something that was a draft planning proposal, that traffic study work needed to be done, and that's what's currently taking place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grove. Councillor Zareka.
Mr Mayor, I think there's some confusion here, and just to clarify things, if I may ask. Just a question on what was our role specifically as a council? Because my understanding is this project is state significant. It was the applicant went straight to the state government, and they've essentially come to us for a rezone, and that's it.
Mr Davis.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So our role as the relevant planning authority is to actually consider the request for a planning proposal, which is essentially a change to the LEP for the purposes of adding the permissibility of educational establishments on the site and changing potentially the floor space ratio on the site.
One more question. What's our jurisdiction?
So the extent of our jurisdiction in relation to that matter is to consider the strategic planning merits of the proposal, and also to consider the infrastructure implications that are required to support such a change.
I've got Councillor Elmore, and I believe Councillor Sarkis has indicated, and Councillor Lake, but I'll go Councillor Elmore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This debate's got me to think about a few questions, and I understand that there's a state significant project, so there's the project, the DA is going to be determined by the Department of Planning. Is that right?
That's correct.
So, and Council's doing the assessment of the development application. The Department of Planning is not doing that.
No. So just for clarification, Mr Mayor, there's two things that need to happen for this school to occur.
Yeah.
Council needs to rezone the site to permit schools,
that.
and the department needs to approve the DA for the school.
Okay.
Both of those need to occur.
The applicant told us that the DA has been out on public exhibition.
Through Mr Mayor, that's correct.
And do we know if the RMS has commented on the development application?
Yeah, we understand the RMS has commented on the development application.
So that's in the before us now, isn't it?
Sorry, so the RMS may have provided comment on the development application, but not on the actual planning proposal to rezone the site. It's with them at the moment for consideration, and we're awaiting their response.
So I'll be interested to find out what the RMS actually said. That's all for me, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Elmore. Councillor Sarkis.
Yes, Mr Mayor, so RMS is one body that needs to come in. Has been before Council's Traffic Committee. Now, no, I know the answer to that question. And the last point that I would bring up is with a rezone application, and that's essentially what we're here to assess. And this is why I asked whether the rest of that area has been informed of this, not just the adjoining properties, because this is an application of state significance, then it's going to have an impact on that whole area, not just on the streets and the traffic in those streets, but the people living in those streets are going to be affected. This is not an application whereby you're going to have, sorry, no, it sounds like a speech. So,
Councillor Sarkis.
Again, I'd ask, has it gone to the owners of the premises, not just the adjoining properties, Mr Mayor, but...
I believe you're talking about the whole precinct.
Yeah, but the last thing I'd ask is, and Aidan might be able to answer this now, with an R2 zoning, I was led to believe that educational facilities are permissible in an R2 zoning. And so, is it a rezone of zoning, is an application to rezone, or is it an application to upzone so they can get more density?
I believe, and from my perspective, right now it's zoned industrial.
That's correct.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, it is RE1, I think it was, or... IN, yeah.
Yeah,
I did
but
read that in
Mr
the
Davis, would you like to comment?
IN2 it was.
That's correct. It is currently zone industrial, and
Yeah.
educational establishments are prohibited.
Right.
In relation to notification of the planning proposal, we did the early notification in accordance with council's policy as soon as we received it, and that was done to the entire precinct, right up to Station Street, and the other side of the rail line as well, and right up to Rawson Street as well. So we did notify that entire precinct. I'm not sure of the extent of the notification of the DA though by the department.
Yep. So when I look at that site again, Mr Mayor, it's all R2, except for this particular location, it's IN2. Why was that put that way to start with? Like, what was?
I believe it was
logic?
existing use rights. Master Plumbers building.
It was an existing
Thank you.
industrial facility that was there previously, and the building represents that zoning as well.
And my last question, Mr Mayor, is the rest of the R2 zoned area there has an FSR of
0.6 to 1, yes.
So we're doubling what the rest of the, okay, which is fair enough. I have no problem with that.
Thank you, councillor Sarkis. Councillor Lake, you wish to, and then I have councillor Garrard. Councillor Lake.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Ms Deegan talked about the impact that the proposal has on the St Heliers Road, Rawson Street intersection, and she advises us that, in her view, that impact is pretty minimal. Yet, in our business paper tonight, we've been told quite differently that this is really critical, that intersection's key to the proper amenity that can be provided through this planning proposal. So why is there a difference of view there, and what do you say the impact is from the school? Why is that intersection so important to this proposal?
Mr Davis.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So the intersection is critical to the school and to increase development potential in the precinct generally. So it's both. And the modelling work that we had done had had various scenarios. It had a scenario where there was reasonable upzoning in the precinct, medium density, some high density up close to the station, and with the school and without the school. What we don't have at this stage, or what we haven't determined at this stage out of that modelling, we haven't taken out of that, well, what's the proportion for the school? But it is a critical infrastructure for development in that precinct, with or without the school. But if the school was to, the school is the thing that requires the intersection upgrade sooner rather than later. The rest of the precinct hasn't been planned for further increased development yet. And the RMS are essentially, it's their intersection, so they're going to have the primary carriage of determining how those intersections can be upgraded to accommodate both this school and or any upzoning in the precinct otherwise. And how that is funded is a matter, it's actually less a matter for council, more a matter for the RMS.
Councillor Lake.
Following, do you disagree with the assessment that the impact is only from the school is only about 2%?
We don't know yet what proportion. We haven't determined that yet, so we haven't looked into that at this stage. I'd be surprised if it was only 2% though, but we have, like I said, we haven't looked at that.
When will we get some advice about that?
Through Mr Mayor, certainly the things that we're working at the moment, we're waiting on the RMS, as you know, and Transport for New South Wales. Once we've received their advice, we'll get costings on the work, and we'll also determine what the proportion would be. That might be the council's view, or that might be what we might recommend as reasonable. However, I should point out again, it's the RMS that needs to agree to it, because it's unlikely to be council that will fund. If that's required sooner rather than later because of the school developing the precinct, it's actually the state that needs to agree to the funding makeup and the difference.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Councillor Garrard.
Yes, Mr Mayor, look, I agree with the amendment, and I think the first paragraph on page 97 states everything that's required, and it highlights the importance of the St Heliers Rawson Road intersection, which is under the control of the RMS, but it talks about the need for, the acquisition of property immediately to the south. And the more you look at this, this issue should not progress in the chamber until we get thorough consensus with the RMS about what they want to do. This is the amount of money that's been spoken about here in a VPA is a nonsense in relation to which in turn, when you look at the amount of work that has to be done here, and it hasn't been identified, hasn't been costed, and as you've correctly said, the state has to carry a great percentage of that, and we need to be very careful just how far we proceed so that we don't sort of undermine what would happen in the future, and also guard our own responsibilities. But is there a traffic study from the applicant?
Mr Davis.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, a traffic study was provided from the applicant initially. However, it was it was solely in relation to their site, not taking into account any other development or increase in development in the remainder of that precinct. So it was complete isolation, whereas the study that Council Commission considered scenarios where there was upzoning for redevelopment across the broader precinct.
Well, I would suggest, Mr Mayor, there's our first problem.
The point that was just clarified was, and I haven't seen those yet, but we provided our study to the proponent, and they were, as promised, they were going to then take those and put their modelling or apply their modelling to those.
I can't see the words in there at all that identify any comment at all by the applicant's traffic people. Only read a study that we've done, and I think that the study that should have been done by the applicant should have been a wider study, considering the impact of this whole area. I mean, what we need to be looking at strategically is everything that's going to occur inside that precinct and even closer to it elsewhere, and say, well, how are we going to handle all these problems when they come on our desk? And the only way to do that is to have studies which are far wide-reaching than just the immediate development that is being spoken about. So I can highlight other traffic studies that are being done in our nearby area, which incorporate massive amounts of information from where traffic's coming and going from a wider field. So I just think we've probably not addressed this strategically as best we possibly could. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this discussion here tonight. I think it needs to be deferred. This is very, very half-baked, and until we find out where the RMS is coming from, we aren't in a position to go forward.
Will the motion be put, Mr Mayor?
Well, thank you, Councillor Garrard. I did have, I have had speakers on both sides, so. Well, yeah, thank you, Councillor Zeta. I have a motion, have a mover that the motion be put. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council, I have an amendment moved Councillor Lake, seconded Councillor Grove, for basically a deferral pending the receipt of feedback from Transport for New South Wales Roads and Maritime Services following a draft traffic study conducted in the relation to the precinct. And I have a motion as written, moved Councillor Zareka, seconded Councillor Sarkis. I'll put the amendment, and we'll class it as a planning proposal. So all those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. Councillor Grove, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Wong, Councillor Lake, Councillor Saha, Councillor Christou, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Cummings. Those against? I have Councillor Elmore, Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Zareka and Councillor Addy. I declare the amendment... Oh, sorry, my apologies, Councillor Hamid. I declare the amendment carried. The amendment now becomes the motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Councillor Grove, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Wong, Councillor Lake, Councillor Saha, Councillor Christou, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Cummings. Those against? Councillor Addy, Councillor Zareka, Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Elmore and Councillor Hamid. I declare that carried. Recorded, and that's why I called for a show of hands, Councillor Elmore. It's actually 186. Councillor Lake.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll move the recommendation subject to a short amendment to recommendation 1. So following the words in recommendation 1, I'd add these words: subject to an amendment to the swimming pool's closing time for the period 27 December 18 to 2nd January 19, being amended from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Is there a second, Councillor Saha? Do you wish further discussion, councillor Lake?
Just to emphasise, if anyone's around between Christmas and New Year in Wentworthville, it's pretty bloody hot. And I would say that any kids swimming around in the pool at 5 o'clock with mum and dad would probably want to stay in a bit later than 5. So I think our staff during that period would be happy to see the pools open and our community enjoying themselves.
Thank you, councillor Lake. Councillor Sarkis?
Mr Mayor, just a question. What time do our pools close in the summer now?
5 o'clock.
And what opportunity is there to, I mean, during the school holidays at least, are we not able to make that 6 or 6:30? I mean, you see...
I'll hand over to Ms Endicott.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the general opening hours for the summer period are until 8 p.m. However, this was proposed for the close down period, the period between Christmas and New Year's Day. So the report was recommending that we close earlier, but this is the motion or the amendment that's been put forward is simply to keep it consistent with the other summer times, so to 8 p.m.
In the answer to my first question is 8 p.m. not...
That's correct.
Not 5 p.m.
That's correct.
Okay, so the answer that I got initially was wrong. So 8 p.m. is good, and yeah, and I'd wholeheartedly support, because most of the time you're going to get visitors that come down to see you during that period. You want to take them to cool off, you're going to take them to the pools. During the middle of the day is way too hot. That's the time to take them.
Thank you, councillor Sarkis. Councillor Grove?
Will this motion in any way impact upon our relationship with Belgravia?
Ms Endicott?
I can simply speak to them about keeping it open for a longer period of time. It'll only result in, I'd have to
report back to us if there's a problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm happy to move that the motion be put if required.
Well, I'll ask this if there's any further discussion. Thank you. Right of reply, councillor Lake? I'll put it then. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council, item 189, councillor Christou, that's the Cumberland Business Service Directory Notice of Motion. And second, but
I'd like to thank the council officers for providing this report. We asked for a report, we received it. We acknowledged the report. I'd just like to move an amendment to the report as well. We add in addition what's highlighted in yellow. I think we can all read it if you want. I can read it out aloud. Basically, the amendment says that we also consider including business safety and crime prevention, energy efficiency for businesses, and recycling and waste disposal for business sections under business support program in the Cumberland Council website. So if we could add that, I'd be happy with that, and I hope my colleagues can agree to that.
let's move councillor Christou, seconded councillor Saha. Is there any discussion? No discussion? Right, well, no discussion, I'll put it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. 192, council, amendment to the council resolution of the council chambers table. Councillor Sarkis.
Mayor, I move this as a notice motion because this was the only way to bring this back. It's a part of the resolution of CO3-1842. It was agreed that we would have a plan table in the middle, and this is what we used to have in the former council, where we'd put a plan and we'd project it up to the screen. What we've realised in the last year, Mr. Mayor, is that we don't actually need that anymore because everything's electronic and it's presented on the TV screens, on the screens there, and it's going to be much more functionable for this council not to have it there with the new design of tables. And so merely a procedural motion that I've put in just so that we can get rid of it and have these tables without this plan table in the middle. I formally move that.
Councillor Garrard has his name on the notice of motion, so I take it Councillor Garrard is...
I'm talking on this one,
second,
Mr. Mayor. I mean, this is clearly an election issue, the size of the table, clearly an election issue in 2020, and I want my name recorded as seconding this resolution.
You'll have that, councillor Carroll. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Before you do, I'll declare the meeting closed at 7:30.